Salut tout le monde. Damiba's been arrested and officially been deported. He's been returned to Burkina Faso. Now, there are people who don't believe in the sincerity of the Togolese government. They think that Nasingbe is basically trying to play the fence, trying to play the game back and forth. But I think what you're dealing with is a leader who understands the situation in his country is dire. So he's trying to throw a bone to the Burkinabe people because there are so many people rising up in Togo against him. He's been having to deal with issues for years, shutting down the electricity, so on and so forth, elections highly contested. And so throwing a bone to the AES and making it seem as if somehow he's involved with what they're doing is definitely a way for him to be able to get people on board with that which he's planning. But, we're talking about politics, right? So there's no good guy or bad guy. They're only interests, but those interests are worth what they are worth to different people. Nasingbe is somebody who has a family legacy and history of rule in the region. And that rule, he steps down and probably he finds himself having to answer a whole bevy and bunch of questions going back to the era of his father. So he's going to try to do his best. I think that the fans of Africa, the issue with them is that, well, they're taking this revolution. When I say revolution, what's happening in West Africa, in the Sahel especially, they're taking it too much to heart. And there is a degree of passion that's involved. And that passion has pushed a lot of people to try to overestimate the commitment of people in the sub-region. So if a movement takes place or something takes place outside of the bounds of the bordery, outside of the boundaries of the revolution, then you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with people who are moving very Machiavellian, and you're not going to understand the movement. The movement is very simple. Yashingbe is trying not to get close to the AES, because if the AES turn around tomorrow and tell him, okay, well, you have to integrate with us and you have to do things based upon our level, he's not going to be well positioned for that because he's not interested in that. And especially if it causes him to go against the French in a way that undermines him and undermines his sovereignty. Because now the French are going to be leaning on him as they've leaned on Ouattara in the past. Ouattara was much older than he is. And he can find himself in a situation where he's completely, his hands are completely tied. So he needs the revolution. Traore's revolution, Goita's revolution, Chinese revolution. He needs that aspect of it because that will provide him with a belt. That will provide him with a shield against the rapaces of the French, whilst at the same time having access to the French for whatever he may need against any of those should they choose to rise up against him. I think that's the kind of posture that you're going to see now. He's also trying to keep ECOWAS sweet because one of the provisos before extraditing Damiba was ultimately what? It was that they don't execute Damiba and that they give him a fair trial. And I don't really believe that this is a dude who actually gives a damn about people being executed having a fair trial. If he really cared about Damiba, he never would have delivered him to the AES. Meanwhile, he wants to make sure that he's caught on record requiring these things before extraditing, so that way he can hold his hands up to ECOWAS and say, you see, we did everything lockstep within the confines and the boundaries of the law. And he can placate his own people at the same time because he can give rise to what we're hearing now, this idea that, Togo is somehow in conjunction with the AES. It kind of makes me think there are a lot of people who don't understand the dynamics of Francophone West Africa. This is not a question of overthrowing a government, because it's like you overthrow a government and then you're having to overthrow the system surrounding that government. All of the ministers, all of the businessmen, the rich multimillionaires, the billionaires, if there are even any in Togo. You're having to overthrow all of those people. And those people, they have their supporters. They have their hands and their holds on the systems of justice, law, and order. So this is a situation that will need some degree of focus. Focus that only the people on the ground can give it. And by focus, I mean more than just words on the internet. Shy of that, it's just going to be protests. Short of that, it's just going to be outrage, indignation. And Nyasimbe is going to continue to rule. And he's going to continue to be a young wise monkey, become an old wise monkey. Been able to try to position himself perhaps as Ufebwanyi back in the day did when Thomas Sankara was rising for power. You know that Ufebwanyi obviously was the one who facilitated the killing of Thomas Sankara. Well, what then is to be said about Fonya Singbe? Could this be perhaps a ploy to draw in the AES to gain and garner their favor? I mean, recently there was the Pan-African conference that took place there a couple of weeks ago. Now, it's nothing to do with Togo necessarily. It's something that's decided. And each country has their turn to host the event. But supposedly the event went off without a hitch. And since the event went off without a hitch, I mean, there were many people who were upset about that. Many people very concerned about that situation. But it went off without a hitch, apparently. And so since it went off without a hitch, there are people who are starting to revise their position on Nasingbe. For Nasingbe is somebody who is definitely operating an agenda. That's to be said. And if he's operating an agenda, the agenda is obviously going to be to stay in power, whichever way the wind blows. He's not going to do anything that's going to put him in a position to leave the power. Right? Now, of course, he stood up to ECOWAS, but we've seen that before. Just because you stand up to one bloc or to one governing body or to one regional authorization or one regional organization, that doesn't mean that you represent anything other than yourself, right? It's like a gang member or a gangster who stands up to the police. That doesn't mean that he's for the people. It just means he doesn't like being told what to do. Right? So there's levels to that. But at the very least, what we're going to know is that this situation, as far as the extradition, we just have to stay locked into that one situation there. Stay locked into it. Study Fonya Singbe because he's definitely one to watch. You know, Damiba, he's one in a long line of people trying to take power in Burkina Faso. I mean, really and truly, I look at him and I just see somebody. He's a military man. Most of these military men were trained under the auspices of the French. Some of them even trained by the French. You know, he came to power supposedly to stop the terrorism, to stop the attacks and all of these things happening in the in the W National Park. Didn't succeed. And it's kind of like, well, if he's brought in to stop that situation, and we know that that situation is being fueled by external entities, activities, then we know straight off the bat that his whole entire thing, well, probably not the whole entire thing, but we know definitely that he was approached at some stage by the French. And if he's approached by the French, he's always going to be lockstep with the French because he has no friends otherwise. At this point, there's no talk about locking him up in Burkina. You're looking up in Burkina, he can find himself just like Blaise Compaoré slipping away, abducted by the French somehow, or by any number of people walking around with weapon and things of that nature in that area, in that region. He could go missing. And if he goes missing, he becomes a standard behind which to rally. I feel as if his trial needs to be public and it needs to be commensurate. It's not a question of doing something to him out of revenge. It's about sending a message and also eliminating the threat that he poses. And this is a Burkina affair. This is a Burkina situation. I don't really believe that anybody has the right to step in and tell them how to handle their ingrown traitors, their in-house traitors. For Nessingbe is nobody to talk when it comes to that, because him and his father, the amount of people they don't kill, amount of people they don't take out of here. They don't take out of here enough people. I mean, from the father's days, flying folk up into a helicopter and dropping them off in the forest and everything, they're nobody. They're the last people to be telling anybody about human rights. And I'm sure Ibrahim Traore is well aware of that. So taking in Damiba now, we'll see. We'll see what the child looks like. We'll see if this man tries to snitch to save his sorry hide. We'll see who all up in the shadow dancing. We're going to see all of that. So ultimately, we'll be able to see who it is that's actually behind this person. Just looking at the reactions, perhaps, on the French side of things. If you want to know what something is worth to somebody, threaten that thing. It's very simple. Or perhaps the French won't do anything, they'll just turn to the side. Now, I don't think that this guy is so sophisticated that he's so deep into the confidence of the French. I believe that most likely he's just a useful pawn, a useful idiot. I mean, the guy seems to just be a complete idiot and a farce of a person, a farce of a human being. I mean, his own soldiers turned against him, so what does that tell you? Even his own host in Togo has turned against him. This guy doesn't seem to have that charisma or that ability to keep people's loyalty for very long. But of course, it probably stands to reason in being so disloyal and all. Abu National Park, people are still running rampant over there. He didn't put a dent in that area. His job was to hijack the revolution. And Ibrahim Traore has learned from the mistakes of a Thomas Sankara. There's no Blaise Compaoré in this thing. Damiba would have been the best Compaoré of this era. But instead of hiding in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, he's hiding in Togo. But you see, Ivory Coast, because of Alassane Dramane Ouattara, wouldn't give up Blaise Compaoré. Well, now, the man has been sentenced in absentia for the killing of Thomas Sankara. But he's still down there in Côte d'Ivoire. Him and his brother that was deported from France. And that was funny. Plus his French residency and everything in Ivory Coast. If and when that regime falls and the people do so want it to fall, those guys will really be left with nowhere to go. I guess they're just hoping to enjoy their time in Ivory Coast and then probably die while still in liberty. But these people have to be hunted because they're the criminals. They like to hunt people. So now it's time for the hunters to become the hunted. The hunted, formerly the hunters. But unlike them in that situation in Ivory Coast, Damiba, he could hope for no such succor, no such assistance from the Togolese. And indeed, it's crazy because it's the same families. Alassane Dramane Ouattara was the prime minister of Houphouët-Boigny. Houphouët-Boigny was the one who killed Thomas Sankara. I mean, it was many people involved, but he was the one who facilitated that. And Alassane Dramane Ouattara came in afterwards to be the man's prime minister. That's the prime minister to the head of the government of the then president, Félix Houphouët-Boigny. Now Alassane Ouattara is the president. Of course, there's a whole long backstory to that one. However, that will be talked about in another upload because there's a lot of misunderstanding about French-speaking West Africa, and in particular Ivory Coast, when it comes to their role in things. I mean, if you really keep it 100, this revolution thing, they were the first to throw up Thomas Sankara's image back in the early 2000s, at a time when Burkina wasn't revolutionary and was still being controlled by Blaise Compaoré. So that needs to be mentioned. However, in Togo, the son of Eyadema, who was on the same side, if you will, of the equation, on the same side as the French, Houphouët-Boigny, who was for the France Afrique, also, well, he's broken with that tradition right now. So, of course, look for the man to serve his own interests. That's Nasingbi, the son of Eyadema. Look for the man to serve his own interests. Don't pillory him, because at the end of the day, somebody pursuing their own personal interest might not necessarily be a bad thing, but just take that into account and conjugate that into everything you see the man do. For now, it's good that Damiba has been extradited up there to Burkina, because that's exactly what needs to happen. All of these people need to be removed from circulation. They need to be put into the hands of the revolution. That's it. And Damiba ain't the only one. There's a whole bunch of them who came from Burkina hiding in Côte d'Ivoire and Ivory Coast, who came from Burkina and hiding in Guinea-Conakry. That axis of wickedness and evil has slammed shut. 25 years ago, 20 years ago, Ibrahim Traoré having taken over Burkina, Assimi Goïta having taken over Mali, Abderrahmane Chani having taken over Niger, and then with Long Gbagbo, such as he was back in those times, Gbagbo in Ivory Coast, that would have set an unprecedented tone for the whole continent. But they were active, all of them, at different times. And being active at different times means that it's easier to divide people since they're not on the same page. Civil war in Ivory Coast, a lot of it had to do with what's happening actually right now. Certainly, around the whole issue of Alassane Ouattara. So, Ouattara is in the center of that, and he's obviously setting up his little brother, Photocopy, aka Ibrahima, to take over when eventually he dies, even though this man doesn't have the charisma or the power or the charm or the wit or the intellect of his older brother. He doesn't have it, but he's got the support, and he's a known hitman, He's a known guy. He's done stuff, he's done work. So when it comes to the regime, the people definitely be around that man. That also possibly for another time. Photocopy. However, you know the situation. Right now, good news. Togo is doing something to break away from the tradition. Because the tradition is, well, not the tradition, but to break away from the rhyme of the past. Togo, even if only for Machiavellian purposes, has switched sides for the time being, is in opposition to ECOWAS, to the French, is down, supposedly, with the AES, has capitulated. And ultimately, we'll see what happens with Damiba now. So thanks for that, Nasingbe. That's the one good thing you've done. But don't take your eyes off of that man and treat your people better. Look at you in the way that you treat your people. The people of Togo, they have a voice, they know how to speak. I mean, how many of them know how to speak English? That's neither here nor there, but they have their voice. And ultimately, all of you should also watch the way that the Togolese people are treated, because ultimately they know what's best for them. If he continues to abuse and molest his own people, that's going to be more important than anything he's done here, as far as throwing his own friend Damiba under the bus. You know, these dictators, they'll throw their friends under the bus. They don't care. Whether they give him to the white man, whether they give him to the revolution, doesn't matter. Right? Because it's all about self. You can understand everything a man does when you look at the benefit that the things that he is doing has for him. The things that he's doing are for him. How does this all benefit him and help him stay in power? I think we know exactly how that would benefit him. So he's done a good thing, not necessarily for the right reasons. So that's the key takeaway here. Also, we want to see a public trial. Definitely need to see a public trial. And we need security everywhere over there for Burkina Faso land. Because we can't have somebody jumping up and trying to rescue this bum from jail. Even though it's more than likely that people would just allow this man to run. But a man with his trump, a man with his status, Damiba's status, it's not so easy to come by. So he could remain a key asset in the region. Perhaps this trial could then be taken and manipulated by the West to try to vilify the government of Ibrahim Traore. He's all of these bad things, because everyone else before him took power legally. False. Everyone before him ruled benignly. False. Everyone before him respected the rule of the people. False. It was all false. Burkina, since the time of Thomas Sankara, has never known peace. And even before the time of Thomas Sankara, the people were snatching off of the plate of the ordinary citizens. Nobody ever had a problem with that up until now. Now everybody's recovered a conscience. Crazy. Crazy. Absolutely insane. So, no, of course we know the script. We know what it is. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be vigilant that this trial isn't manipulated against the movement and against Ibrahim Traore and against his government and his people. Because if he is seen to publicly do something, we need to just all make videos in support of that which he does, provided that, of course, it is lockstep within what is best for the country of Burkina, for the AES, and for the sub-region in Francophone West Africa and West Africa as a whole. Vigilant for that cause, therefore, we need to be. So, yeah, Damiba has been stopped, being extradited, because being stopped is one thing. Officially extradited, that's what we wanted. And I'm happy for that. Thanks for listening to my video. Yeah, man. Like the video, share the video, subscribe if you want. And, I'm out. Peace.